everyone, and welcome back to Venus Pages to another video on Hamlet. This one is on Act 2 and it's also part 2 of my series where we go through act by act and I do a summary and analysis and give you some quotes to help with whatever exam you're writing or just sate your general interest. So we last left off with Hamlet vowing to put on an antic disposition and vowing to get revenge. So let's see what happens in Act 2 with a considerable shift and change of time. So the scene starts with Polonius and his servant Reynaldo, and this scene is set quite a while after Laertes has gone to France. We're not exactly sure of how much time has passed, but given that he's now sending the servant to spy on his son, it's likely been a few weeks, which is also significant as it tells us just how much time Hamlet has had to enact his plan, and we'll later see how successful he has been so far in doing so. So we learn that Polonius and Reynaldo have done this spying before. They have previously spied on someone or spread rumors, so it's clear that there's experience and intrigue, and considering who Polonius works for, Claudius, this also tells us a lot about Claudius's tactics. Well, we knew before that Claudius was quite corrupt since he was willing to kill his brother just to seize the throne, but now we see by what other means he has come to acquire control. He doesn't have this control and respect of everyone who thinks that he knows everything just because he's genuinely a smart and calculating man, but rather because he sends out spies to spy on people, to tell him things that he needs to know to get them on his side. And he also sends out spies to get rid of opponents, to get the dirt on people, to get them out, because all he cares is about his power, and any challenges to his dictatorial power should be wiped away. And so it's clear that there is a lot of surveillance and reputational manipulation going on within the court. There's a lot of inner turmoil, which also links back to the very first act scene 1, where we see that the guards are really scared of the threat from within, of what's going to come out at them from behind, like from within the castle gates rather than from outside. So they're more scared of an internal threat because you can't really sleep calmly knowing that so many people are out to get you, or well, they're suspicious of not only Claudius but rather his team of advisors, because this is not beneath them if they're willing to do this to Polonius's own son. So he sends Reynaldo out to give him this money and these notes, so give him some money, but before doing that to make inquiry of his behavior. Essentially, he wants him to find out what company his son is in, how much money he spends, where they spend time, to pretend that he knows his father and his friends and in part him. So at first this may seem like an inquiry of just a father into his son, even if it is going behind his son's back and he could just ask his son. But then he continues on to tell Reynaldo, the manservant, to spread rumors. Before we get onto that, this theme of surveillance would have been quite contemporary for Shakespeare's audiences too. Obviously not for the same extent as us. During Shakespeare's time, in particular, spies were beginning to garner popularity. There was a lot of spying between kingdoms. So in particular, for example, Shakespeare's contemporary Marlowe was said to be a spy. And so this would have been quite relevant. There's a lot of espionage going on for other governments, and seeing that Claudius employs the same tactics, it would have been quite contemporary for the audiences to watch this. They would have felt like they can relate to this to a certain extent, at least to the worry and unease that the characters feel, given that they're being watched like all the time. So Polonius tells him, "You may say not well, but if he be, I mean he's very wild, addicted so and there put on him what forgeries you please." So basically he's saying that once you've heard about Laertes, talk up his reputation and his actions and have him be addicted to wild activities and dishonesty. Be careful not to dishonor him, just kind of paint him as taking part in a lot of debauchery. Just be careful not to tarnish the reputation too much, but tarnish it a little, because he wants to see the reactions that people have. Like, if they agree with him, does it sound like this is what his son is doing? If they don't agree with him, does he truly have good friends? So he's investigating. You must not put another scandal on him, that he's open to incontinency. That's not my meaning, but breathe his faults so quaintly. So Reynaldo doesn't rush to agree. He's actually very hesitant to do this. We can guess that he's good friends with Laertes, and he's wondering why he would be tarnishing like Larity's reputation in particular when he's Polonius's own son. But Polonius quickly reminds him that Reynaldo is just a servant, and who is he to challenge him? So Polonius is very much always aware of their social roles. He has a lot of ambitions. He has a lot of plans for the king, which is why he's always subservient to Claudius himself. And so even in his own kind of relationships, he's very quick to establish an hierarchy and say, well, I'm the leader here, I'm the boss here, which is why his extremely serving behavior to Claudius comes off as quite hypocritical given how he's behaving. If he doesn't want to act this way towards Claudius, then he shouldn't expect others to act this way towards him. However, we see that he is very happy to act this way for Claudius because he has his own ambitions, and he thinks that by being in their favor, he can climb up the ranks. He reminds him that your bait of falsehood takes the scarp of truth, and thus do we, of wisdom and of reach, with windlasses and with essays of bias, by indirections find directions out. So yeah, essentially he's sending Reynaldo out to see what kind of reputation he has, and it's interesting what activities he suggests to tarnish Larity's reputation. Well, to rather not tarnish, but to prompt at it, to prod at it, to see what it's actually like. So he suggests that sins are going to brothels, gaming, as in betting, drinking, and Reynaldo warns him that they be more careful about the activities that they suggest, but Polonius is set on his plan. So Reynaldo then exits, and Ophelia comes in, and she's visibly upset. He asks her what the matter, and she replies with, "I have been so affrighted." She tells him that she was sewing in his chamber when suddenly Hamlet came in, looking frankly unsuited to a man of his status. His doublet was unbraced, there was no hat upon his head. This would have been seen as very impolite, as hats were essential to good manners. His stockings are fouled, so dirty, they're hanging down to his ankles. Physically, he is pale as his shirt, his knees knocking each other, and was looked so piteous and purpurt as if he had been loosed out of heaven. In other words, there's not really much blood in Hamlet's face. He's very pale. He's really white looking. He doesn't have much energy. He looks weak. His knees are knocking. He's nervous. He's frightened. He's upset. He's acting as someone mad. And Polonius asks, "Mad for thy love." So we see that some time has passed since Polonius essentially told Ophelia that her reputation is always on the line, and so is his, so she shouldn't be following her own affections and feelings and emotions, and she should be telling Hamlet to go away, and this is what it has led to. So Polonius's deduction, "mad for thy love," it's reasonable. It's probably what Hamlet wants to portray. We don't quite know why he wants in particular to involve Ophelia in this, but this would have been very typical of the image of a lover mad for love. If you look at kind of paintings and depictions and letters and writings of the time, there was this idea that if you're in love, if you're truly in love, you're completely weak, especially if it's unrequited. You lay on your bed all day and you kind of just fantasize about the person you love, and you're physically weakened because your emotion is so strong and so powerful. And so him being in such disarray, him looking so messy, this isn't something that he should be doing as the heir to the throne, as the next king of Denmark. I mean, his health and his sanity is linked to the well-being of the state, as we have discussed in the previous video. So this is very much an act of someone in love, is what he wants to portray. So we find out that Hamlet comes in and he takes her by the wrist and he holds her and he looks at her face in such perusal as he would draw it. He stayed like this for a while, and then when she moved, because like, what do you do if someone's clinging to your hands, right? Well, she moves, she panics, she's still a young girl, she's inexperienced, she's very naive, she's innocent. She's truly the innocent victim in this entire play because she doesn't realize anything. Like, she doesn't understand why things are happening. She's constantly manipulated by the male characters in her life, and so she moves and he sighs, so piteous and profound that it did seem to shatter his bulk and end his being. He lets her go after she sighs, and he turns around and he walks out of the door really downcast, and poor Ophelia is in a complete mess. She's very emotional because she feels like, because of me, this man is suffering. He's losing his sanity. After he leaves, she runs to her father Polonius to report this incident, and he just tells her to follow him, that he'll look for the king and tell him of any passion. So Polonius's thought is not to comfort his daughter and say, "Oh, don't worry, it'll be okay," or like, "I'm here to help you," or, well, sorry for making all this mess in the first place, because he's the one who told her to reject him. All he's thinking about is the king and his position with the king. It really shows that Polonius doesn't care much about his daughter. His daughter is just another thing for him to trade. He sees this as beneficial. Well, if Hamlet likes her, I can get get in the king and queen's good books. And if I tell them, then they'll know why he's mad, and I'll be even more in their good books. He asks her if she has spoken to him lately, and that's when she says that she obeyed Polonius's instructions. She repelled his letters and denied his access to me. And Polonius is confident that it is this that has made him mad. He feels a little bit sorry that he has trifled, and he curses his jealousy, saying that it's common for people of his age to voice their opinions without considering the feelings of the young. But really, this is a very minimal attempt at comforting. There is no stage direction whatsoever for him to rush and hug his daughter and say, oh, like, it'll be fine. Rather, he says, come, we go to the king. This must be known, which being kept close might move more grief to hide than hate to utter love. This affair may well cause more trouble if they try to keep it hidden, and he's very sure that the king and queen will disapprove. And I think he's likely mistaken about the king and queen disapproving, because honestly, Polonius is like a close advisor, which makes Ophelia not exactly a nobody. I mean, she would have been quite, if not well off, well, she would have certainly been well respected as a lady, given her father's position in court. Absolutely heartbreaking here that Ophelia is the only one with genuine feelings of affection and concern for Hamlet. She's not concerned about herself. She's concerned about Hamlet's feelings. Literally no one in this entire play stops to think about Hamlet's feelings on this level, on this genuine feeling of empathy. And it shows that she likes him, she cares for this man. And what is her treatment in response? Hamlet is using her, Polonius is using her, everyone is using Ophelia. And so I think when we talk about the true victims of this tragedy, it's not Hamlet. Yes, of course Hamlet suffers, of course he's the protagonist, but the true victim is poor Ophelia, just like many women would have been at the time. And I think this is Shakespeare's rather progressive message, telling people to, well, look at the casualties of your behavior, of your thirst for power and for corruption and for control. You control a woman's every move, and then this is what she ends up like. And I mean, it's not specifically like a feminist message. It's just a message, it's just a very human message to actually care about someone's feelings rather than simply use them for your own benefit. And so Hamlet is putting on this show, and Polonius expresses no concern. Even after all of this Hamlet's well-orchestrated show, Ophelia's language is emotional. She uses words like piteous and profound, but for Polonius it's all about what to do next, whether this will hurt them. So the scene ends with him saying, like, come, let's go to Claudius, and they leave. And that's it. We move on to Act 2.2 with no consideration of Ophelia. We can only understand what she's feeling because she doesn't get a monologue. She doesn't really get a voice to speak out and be by herself like many other characters quite yet. All we know is that she's extremely emotive by the language that she's using. In Act 2.2, enter Claudius, Gertrude, Rosencrantz, Guildenstern, and the attendants. And Claudius welcomes Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. The need we have to use you did provoke our hasty sending. Something have you heard of Hamlet's transformation, so I call it, since not the exterior nor the inward man resembles that it was. Essentially, Hamlet is behaving extremely differently. I mean, we've gathered that from the previous act that he's putting on his antic disposition, and rather successfully, given that everyone seems to believe it. So the king and queen finally decide to take action and to, for the queen to think about what her son is doing. And he introduces Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, Claudius does. He says that being of so young days brought up with him, and since so neighbor to his youth and humor, so childhood friends. And Gertrude adds swiftly, and sure I am to men there are not living to whom he more adheres. So essentially what they're saying when they're introducing Guildenstern and Rosencrantz is that they are there, that they have been invited to cheer Hamlet up. And there is likely a financial benefit, because they later tell them like, oh, if you fix our son, whatever you want, it's yours. So in reality, this is part of Claudius's paranoia about Hamlet being onto him, rather than a particular concern for his nephew. For Gertrude, it likely more is about concern, but it also seems as if it's there to really kind of calm her guilt down, because she feels guilty, as we'll see later on. And Guildenstern and Rosencrantz, they agree to help them out. So again, even Hamlet's so-called friends don't particularly care about Hamlet's feelings. They're there to just act for the royal family, and they are dismissed. Thanks, Guildenstern, gentle Rosencrantz. I beseech you instantly to visit my too much changed son. son. From this scene, it's also clear the extent to which Gertrude and Claudius are not involved in Hamlet's life, that they think that these are his true friends and not Horatio. I mean, even we as the audience know that these are not his true friends. He has not mentioned them once, whereas Horatio, he rushes with such greetings, and Bernardo and Marcellus and all these people. And so it's clear as well that Gertrude has not interacted with her son for quite a while, and this is likely due to Claudius. He doesn't want her communicating with her son, because then that means that he can plot something and take over, and Claudius is extremely paranoid. So Polonius comes in. The first thing he does is he makes sure to remind Claudius of his loyalty. I hold my duty as I hold my soul, both to my God and to my gracious king. Well, it shows Polonius's understanding of Claudius, how much Claudius likes to be bowed down to be respected, to say, oh yes, you are my God, you're my gracious king. This is why he wanted power in the first place, to feel the sense of control. He has a manic need to feel the sense of control. So he tells him that, as it has used to do, that I have found the very cause of Hamlet's lunacy. But he urges Claudius to, before he reveals this lunacy, to speak to ambassadors first, because the ambassadors have arrived. And when he leaves to go get the ambassadors, because Claudius agrees, Claudius turns to Gertrude, and she says, I doubt it is no other but the main, his father's death and our over-hasty marriage. We see here that there's a lot of guilt and understanding on Gertrude's part. I feel like she's another very misunderstood character in the play, as is Polonius in a way, but Polonius is a different conversation. Gertrude is presented as like this lecherous woman, but in reality, it feels like she has just fallen prey to Claudius's manipulations. And now that she's married to him, what else is she supposed to do? If she protests, she'll be locked away, just like she'll be locked away and all the decisions will be made without her. Or worse, she'll be like Ophelia, with nobody there, left to her own devices and to her own madness and thoughts. So there's not really much for Gertrude here to do, and she feels this guilt towards Hamlet for her own behavior. But really, she cannot go to him, she cannot speak to him, and she cannot properly apologize to him. And it's clear that this weighs on her. And it's much like the old King Hamlet has said, let the barbs inside her be her punishment, because she has morals, she has a consciousness. She's different from Claudius. Claudius feels no regret whatsoever about his actions, but she's not exactly guilty, but she feels bad about remarrying. She still grieves for her true love, Hamlet's father. And so the ambassadors come in. We don't really get much of a chance to sit with Gertrude and learn more of her true feelings. Again, she's dismissed, brushed aside, and it seems from the ambassadors like the business with Norway has been rather settled. Claudius has managed to stop Fortinbras invading Denmark at least, but from the report we see that Fortinbras, well, he has a goal, he has an obstacle. He's not going to stop moving. He makes it his goal to conquer more land, and so he requests in a letter if he can move through Denmark to get to Poland. Very suspicious. Claudius thanks the ambassadors for the letter, and he says he'll think about it, dismisses them. And Polonius then comes in again, eager to appease the king at the cost of his daughter. So he wants to be secure in his position. And he says that, therefore, since the brevity is the soul of wit, and tediousness the limbs and outward flourishes, I will be brief. Your noble son is mad. Mad call I it, for to define true madness, what is but to be nothing else but mad? But let that go. So what he's saying is, I'll be brief, I'll tell you why your son is mad, and then he proceeds with this lengthy introduction like, oh, your son is mad, but what is madness? In general, I feel like Polonius is a character who gets lost in thought. He's a rambling old man a lot of the times. And Gertrude is honestly sick of it, because Polonius is like this every time he enters the room. And so she tells him, more matter with less art. She's fed up with Polonius. He always takes a long time to get to the point. He speaks in these lengthy speeches. I mean, he just cares about his ambitions, and he'll do anything to speak in pretty and florid language if it means getting admiration from Claudius and heightening his own position. So Polonius is chastened by the lady, and he says, yeah, fine, I'll get to the point. I have a daughter, half whilst she is mine, who in her duty and obedience, mark, has given me this, now gather and surmise. This part, so I have a daughter, half while she is mine. Again, he's incapable of saying something, getting to the point, and he says, who in her duty and obedience, mark. Mark, my daughter is dutiful and obedient. I can control her. I can control her. That would be useful if your son ends up marrying my daughter. And also, look, I'm very good at control. Shouldn't I be moved up the ranks even further? He reads the letter. To the celestial and my soul's idol, the most beautified Ophelia. So Polonius hates this phrase. He says that it's a vile phrase because beautified would mean as in like she put on makeup to be more beautiful or like she changed something about her appearance. But nevertheless, we continue with Hamlet's letter. Doubt thou the stars are fire. Doubt that the sun does move. Doubt truth to be a liar. But never doubt I love. Hamlet is writing all these romantic letters to Ophelia. Again, isn't it highly convenient that he resumed, or well, started, writing these letters right when he's pretending to be mad? Again, manipulating Ophelia's emotions, happy to use her for his own benefit. This in obedience has my daughter showed me, and moreover has his solicitings, as they fell out by time, by means, and place, all given to mine ear. This in obedience has my daughter showed me. I mean, this is a private letter, and here's Polonius just airing it out to the king and queen. He then proceeds to explain his reasoning for this and says, I thought about what you majesties would think, and I understood that you would probably be against Ophelia's marriage with Hamlet. So I told her, Lord Hamlet is a prince out of thy star. This must not be. So he told her to lock herself away, have no messengers, have no guilts, and Hamlet then fell into a sadness, then into a fast, thence to a watch, thence into a weakness, thence to a lightness, and by this declension into the madness wherein now he raves, and all we wail for. So the word declension is a pun on the grammatical sense, but it's also a process of steady deterioration. So essentially he's telling the king and queen, yep, this is it. It's because of my daughter. It's madness is a process, and it's a process of declension, and this is how Hamlet came to be. And Gertrude quickly says, it may be very likely. And I think this speaks to her desperation to excuse her own behavior because she feels extremely guilty about this whole situation, and she's already feeling terrible by the fact that Hamlet is acting mad because she thinks it's because of her and her hasty marriage, which is not far from the truth. And so, of course, she says, oh, it may be very likely. Later, we'll see how she treats Ophelia, and she's very encouraging towards her, because if it really is Ophelia, then the blame is off her. Polonius declares, I will find where truth is hid, though it were hid indeed within the center. And he suggests that he will wander into the lobby, and at such a time I'll lose my daughter to him. I'll lose my daughter to him. It's like some kind of animal, like I'll lose my daughter to him, I'll lose my dog onto you. He's just throwing her out there. He literally is using her. I'll lose my daughter to him. Like, I'll let her go to him, and then we can all observe and understand the cause of his madness. It's like an experiment, and Claudius and Gertrude agree to hide and watch. Be you and I behind an arras then, mark the encounter. He's very eager to team up with Claudius and Gertrude against Hamlet, to get into their good graces, because we all know that if you really want to be close to someone, you need to have someone that you mutually hate, so that you can hate on them and plot against them, and not be so focused on hating each other anymore. Gertrude spots Hamlet, but look where sadly the poor wretch comes reading. And at this point we get Hamlet and Polonius's interaction. So Polonius begins to speak to Hamlet. He asks if he knows who he is, and Hamlet says, excellent, well, you're a fishmonger. So here there's a switch to informal language, to prose, not iambic pentameter. It's a sign of disrespect, and also perhaps a sign of madness on Hamlet's part. He's very well aware that Polonius is an important advisor. He's the king's right hand, and here he is calling him a fishmonger. Is this not madness? And is not this madness also a sign that madness was more than just about the state of mind? Madness was also about not fitting into society, and so he's failing to consider the rules and the etiquette of society. But then Hamlet says, oh, you have a daughter. So he's very much playing the game. He very much understands that Polonius is focused on his daughter, that Polonius wants to use Hamlet and Ophelia, and Hamlet is like, well, if you're going to use Ophelia, I'm going to use Ophelia too, and I'm going to use you and your own flaws and errors against you. So yeah, make your assumptions. I'll cater to your assumptions. After little slights and intellectual wordplay, which I'll skip over for reasons of time, essentially he basically throws continuously slights at Polonius, and he tells him that he's he's a bit of a pimp, and obviously this is a performance because to Polonius this makes no sense. He's just like, oh, this guy is mad, he's just rambling. But to the audience, it's clear that this is a sign of his intellectual superiority. He understands that Polonius is always rambling and confused and not that intellectual, and he won't understand these references, these slights, so he's very much just making fun of Polonius. It's a comedy at Polonius's expense for once. To continue, let her not walk in the sun. Conception is a blessing, but not as your daughter may conceive. So he gives them this advice on Ophelia. It's a play on words. To walk in the sun means to go about in public and risk becoming pregnant, conception, by the sun or sun. But conception is also the ability to form ideas. So he's saying that he's pimping out his daughter. Well, yes, because he's using her. He understands that Polonius is using her. And he says, well, be careful what you do, because if you keep pimping her out, what's going to happen? How far are people going to go? And Polonius reflects, he's far gone, and truly in my youth I suffered much extremity for love, very near this. He then remarks, what are you reading? And Hamlet says, words, words, words. So for the audience who knows more than the characters at this point, this is obviously all very amusing, not very much like a tragedy so far. It's just Hamlet poking fun at all these old people who want to meddle in his life. And Polonius, of course, asks, what is the matter, my lord? Between who? So obviously this is a play on words as in matter. Polonius is asking what the book is about, and Hamlet is interpreting it as what's wrong, so he's asking what's wrong with who. When he understands that it's about the book, he says that it's a satire about old men, and he then proceeds to insult them, which again very much is slight at Polonius. He says that old men are described as having weak leg muscles. But then he says, hey, I don't think that's true. You, Polonius, would be as young as me if like a crab you could go backward. So essentially what he's saying is, you're so good at scurrying backwards and bowing down to your superiors just like a crab that I think you might very well be the same age as me if that's the only thing that makes someone young. Though this be madness, yet there is a method in it, Polonius replies. He comes so close, yet so far, to figuring out Hamlet's madness. Though this be madness, there is method in it. The entire fact of there being method in his madness shows that Hamlet is putting on an act, but Polonius is not understanding this, and he also remarks how pregnant sometimes his replies are. So this means witty, and he decides that he'll arrange a meeting between him and his daughter and says he'll take his leave. To which Hamlet replies, you cannot, sir, take from me anything that I will more willingly part withal, except my life, except my life, except my life. So this is very synonymous with definitions of madness of the time, as in madness was if you don't want to live anymore, if you have a gloomy and despondent disposition, and Shakespeare essentially tells us that this is very much a response to his circumstances. Of course he's existential, of course he's gloomy, of course he's depressed. It's a normal response. Although ultimately this response damns him, so how much Shakespeare approves is up to your interpretation. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern come in. Hamlet refers to them as these tedious old fools. However, does he refer to them as these tedious old fools? He says this at the moment when Polonius leaves and they come in. This is very ambiguous. It could be about both. These tedious old fools, as in he's tired of old meddling men like Claudius and Polonius, but it can also be very much about Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. Deliberately ambiguous, and we see why in the next scene. He says, my excellent good friends, how dost thou? He acts fine. There's some banter between them. They catch up on their lives. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern tell them they aren't poor, but nor are they rich, and he then asks them what brings them to Denmark, the prison. Hamlet says it is a prison, even though they disagree. Why then, there is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. To me it is a prison. Rosencrantz replies, why then your ambition makes it one, 'tis too narrow for your mind. His dreams and ambitions make it a prison. Hamlet has always been ambitious, a dreamer, a thinker. Denmark is too small for him, and this is why he views it as a prison, is Rosencrantz's opinion, because they went to university together. And Hamlet says, oh God, I could be bounded in a nutshell and count myself a king of infinite space were it not that I have bad dreams. This is a very insightful line into Hamlet's inner state and psyche right now, that he has bad dreams, he cannot sleep well, he's in a state of constant adrenaline, of constant tension, of nervous worry, because he's so eager to enact his revenge and understand whether Claudius truly killed his father. And Guildenstern says to this, which dreams indeed are ambition, for the very substance of the ambitious is merely the shadow of a dream. Hamlet replies. A dream itself is but a shadow. Rosencrantz. Truly, and I hold ambition of so airy and light a quality that is but a shadow's shadow. Hamlet. Were you not sent for? Is it your own inclining? Is it a free visitation? Come, deal justly with me. So they're having this very philosophical discussion on the nature of dreams. And it tells us a lot about Hamlet's character and what he views as important, what he views as ambitious, and dreams as shadows and promises rather than reality. Just a mere reflection of reality. He lives very much in the real world with all his emotions. But it's clear that all of the discussion was to bait them. He will not be made the fool anymore. He wants to confuse and mislead them, just like he did with Polonius. He's very much aware that his uncle could have sent for them. Discussion about dreams to show them that he's in his right mind, that it's like, oh, it's like the time that we were at university together. We were talking about all these deep and philosophical issues. It was all a trap. And in the end, Guildenstern caves to Hamlet's questioning and admits that yes, they were sent for. Hamlet's disgusted by their loyalty to the royals over him. Everyone is driven by wealth and corruption, everyone who hangs out with the king and queen that we have so far met in the play. And Hamlet offers to tell them why they've been sent for, and it's clear that this is a slight at them. He begins describing his own symptoms, how he has lost all mirth, how he isn't talking with anyone, how he views everything as a foul and pestilent congregation of vapors. He sees by their reaction that he has it exactly right. His speeches dramatize his existentialism, his misery, but there's truth in what he says. Rosencrantz suggests that in that case he may enjoy actors if he doesn't enjoy real people, and that he and Guildenstern saw some on their way there and have invited them to the castle. Hamlet says as long as they're good actors, they will be welcomed, and it's revealed that this is a troupe that he has seen perform before. We now see the play begin to delve into the theme of appearance versus reality, a theme continued later in Act 3. And Hamlet asks them why they're performing if the pay is not great, but Rosencrantz says that child actors have begun to win over the public. And Hamlet is saddened that it's not professionals who are performing anymore, but children. Things that Claudius has also replaced the public's attention in this way. So before, here was old Hamlet, a professional, and now look at this Claudius, imposter. It's a modern commentary on theater. Well, for Shakespeare, it's a modern commentary on theater and his opinions, and it's a slight at Claudius on the same line. The players are just about to arrive, and he suggests to him that his craziness is an act, but it's implied that he thinks that they're too dense to understand this implication, which is why he's being so brazenly and openly honest with them. And Polonius comes in. He's introduced by Hamlet as a great baby. He takes advantage to say whatever he wants to Polonius. What is Polonius going to do? I mean, here is Hamlet, the royal heir, and so he toys some more with Polonius in this scene. He reminds Polonius of his daughter, reminds him that he's obsessed, aware that he's mad with love, and encouraging of this view. And at that point, the actors come in. Enter 4 or 5 players to say the stage directions. So the actors coming in here is quite meta. It's a play within a play. It adds to this entire feeling of being orchestrated, which again links back to the idea of acting and how much of the play's outcome was due to fate and how much was due to poor decisions. Hamlet embraces acting here, and he appeals to the actors. It's clear that he prepared for this. Well, he's not exactly prepared for this, given that the troupe has just showed up, but he has clearly thought about all the different possibilities of revenge. So what is his plan? He speaks to them in prose when he greets them, again, informal. He seems happy to see them. He jokes around. He refers to one as, "What, my young lady and mistress? God, your voice, like a piece of uncurrent gold, be not cracked within the ring." So I hope, in other words, I hope your voice doesn't break. This is because in Shakespeare's time, not many women were actually acting on stage, rather it was young boys. And he references a speech for the first player, and it's a very specific speech. It's about the revenge taken by a son, Pyrrhus, for the death of his father Achilles and the reaction of Hecuba to Priam's slaughter. So Priam was her husband. It's a parallel of their reality, and he clearly picks this one on purpose. It's not merely a test for Polonius, but also a part of his plan to get them to perform this later on. The problem is Polonius is a bit dense, so this reference is clearly lost on him. His only reaction is that this is too long a speech after the first player performs it, so the test does not work. Hamlet launches into a very long soliloquy, which he memorized, again suggesting just how much time he has spent thinking about this issue, that he's been turning to poetry and literature to find something that he relates to. I mean, isn't this a universal feeling that so many of us turn to literature as for healing, as a balm for our souls, and this is what he has done. He memorized an incredibly long soliloquy, suggesting just how much time he spent and how much passion he has delivered, and so he delves into the following lines. With blood of fathers, mothers, daughters, sons, baked in and pasted with the parching streets that lend a tyrannous and damned light to their vile murders. The first player joins in, and then after his speech, Polonius remarks, "Look, wherever he's not turned has color and has tears in his eyes, pray you no more." Hamlet is emotional. For the first time, he's hearing his story, his father's story told again by another person. And Hamlet ignores Polonius's remarks that he's overly emotional and that the first player should stop. And he says to the first player that 'tis well, and to get the players settled, asking for Polonius to get them for they deserve. Polonius replies that he will use them according to their desert. And Hamlet is not happy with this. He says, "Use every man after his desert, and who would escape whipping. Use them after your own honor and dignity. The less they deserve, the more merit is in your bounty. Take them in." So essentially what he's saying is that don't just treat people in a way that's convenient for you. Treat them the way that you want to be treated. And it's this philosophy to always treat people well, even if you don't think that they should be treated well. This shows us quite a bit about Hamlet's character, that these are people who deserve to be treated well, and so they should be treated well. But even if they weren't, they're still guests, and they deserve at least some degree of politeness. He sends off the players, but he pauses the first player and asks him to insert a speech and to perform the murder of Gonzago. At this point, the audience is at the edge of their seats, curious to hear what Hamlet will insert into this play. And the player agrees, and they leave Hamlet alone for the first time since the last act, which gives us a chance to catch up with his mental state and hear his monologue. "Now I am alone. Oh, what a rogue and peasant slave am I." He exclaims his emotion at the fact that this actor, but in a fiction, in a dream of passion, could scrunch up his face and act so well and feel all these emotions, even though it's nothing to him. He's not personally involved. What's Hecuba to him, or he to Hecuba, that he should weep for her? It's another example of a play within a play, since this brief line would also point out to the audience that Hamlet is also just an actor, that Hamlet's story has nothing to do with the actor who plays Hamlet, and yet this doesn't take away from the emotion of Hamlet's monologue in the slightest. He asks what would have happened had he the motive and the cue for passion that I have. Hamlet has all the reason in the world to hate Claudius, to kill him, to look for revenge, but yet he's not doing anything. This is why he's condemning himself, calling himself the lowest of the low. The actor would have, at this point already, make mad the guilty and appall the free, and yet he, Hamlet, can say nothing. No, not for a king upon whose property and most dear life a damned defeat was made. Essentially, Hamlet is condemning his own character. This goes back to what we talked about, how Hamlet's character may essentially be that fatal flaw, that he's a dreamer, not a doer. And in this passage, he very much sees himself in that way. And we'll discuss later, a little bit later, once we have seen more of the tragedy, about what makes a tragedy a tragedy. But in this passage, he's very much critical of himself. "Bloody, bawdy villain, remorseless, treacherous, lecherous, kindless villain, oh, vengeance." He's furious at Claudius, yes, but he's more furious at himself. He calls himself a rascal, a coward, incredibly dishonorable things to call a noble man of his standing in particular. And this listing in iambic pentameter, the rhythm, he's firing himself up. And he's firing himself up, he's hyping himself up, essentially to say, I need to kill Claudius, and it works. He reveals his plans to the audience. "I'll have these players play something like the murder of my father before mine uncle. I'll observe his looks, I'll tend him to the quick. If he but blench, I know my course." In other words, if his uncle so much as pales or changes his countenance, then I will know I have to proceed and commit the murder, commit the act. I'll have grounds more relative than this. The play's the thing wherein I'll catch the conscience of the king. He's incredibly indecisive, and he wants definitive proof before he acts. All talk and no action. But here he finally reveals his plans. He vows to follow through. And he also considers that the spirit that I have seen may be the devil, and the devil has power. He's preparing to commit a crime against God. Murder is a serious crime, and is there anyone less suited to committing this act than poor Hamlet, a university student who's so indecisive and so sensitive? this is ultimately another part of the tragedy, that Hamlet has been forced to do something that he was clearly never destined to do. And we will continue to see how that turns out in the climax in Act 3. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope that you're enjoying the series so far. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you soon.